Hello class. In this video, I want to show you a couple different methods of checking your work using Photoshop and also a free to download program called Gimp that you can use almost the same as Photoshop. This is a technique that I developed for myself in undergrad when I became frustrated in my realistic paintings, not knowing if what I was doing was getting them closer to the photo reference or further away. And so I came up with the system of photographing a artwork in progress and bringing it into Photoshop alongside the photo reference. And if you scale them to the same size, you can actually check to see where it's off. And so I'm going to show you that first. So here is my little flying kitty from the painting that I'm working on. This is the photo reference, and this is a photo I've taken of the painting in progress. And so if you have Photoshop, the first thing you need to do in order to check your work in progress is make sure that your subject in the painting is the same size as the reference. So they're both at 50% zoom, and you can see that the photo of the painting is much bigger than the cat in the photograph. So you're going to go to image size, and right now I'm selecting the painting, and I'm going to shrink it down. Let's see, and I've done this enough that I can kind of estimate how much smaller or bigger, but usually you can just change the width or height to shrink the image, and then you can kind of visually compare. So I just changed it to a slightly smaller size, and I can check it to see if it's the same size by dragging it over to the photo reference. So I'm clicked it, and it allows me to drag this over here. And then over here, this is opacity, and opacity is how see-through this layer is. And so I'm going to make it see-through, and then I can line this up to see if it's the right size. So sometimes when I do this, I've scaled it too small or too large, but it seems like shrinking the width to 22 inches is about right. So now I'm going to turn it all the way up to opacity and toggle just to check. And that looks pretty good to me. Usually what I'm scaling for is the least amount of work to get the drawing or painting to become accurate. So that is what I do. And so then I'll actually paint with this open next to me. And what I do is I'll duplicate the layer, the photo of the painting, and I'll keep one at 100% and one that's semi-translucent. And so depending on the image, it's usually at 50%, but sometimes in order to see both layers at the same time, you have to tailor it to the image. So this allows me to see that I'm a little off with the tail, for example. So this is similar to working from a grid, only it's much more specific to your reference. So when I'm painting, I'll zoom in and I'll check. And so in the painting, there's this line. Oops, I zoomed in a little too much. Painting, there's this line that I can see in the transparency, and then it looks like the actual outer contour of the tail comes a little further. So I'll just double check by toggling that off, and that is indeed the case. So what I will do is then I'll kind of toggle it back and forth sometimes and make the adjustments. And just little observations one at a time. I would just check this contour just section by section to fix it. So that's what I do in Photoshop when I want to check my work. And so if you have Photoshop, that can be a really effective tool. So next, I'm going to show you how to do basically the same thing, but with a Photoshop-like program called Gimp that you can download for free. So I'm just going to show you first over here. Oops, no, it's not this. So if you just Google download GIMP, you can go over here And it doesn't matter if you have Windows or Mac, you can download it for either. So I have a Windows computer, so I downloaded it, installed it, and then let me show you what that looks like once you open it up. So now we're going to go into GIMP. And so this is GIMP. And as you can see, it looks very similar to Photoshop. And so what you have here is I've just went to File, Open, and I've opened up the reference photo of my cat, and then File, Open, and I opened up the photo. And so one thing that's different from Photoshop is you can't be looking at both of the windows at the same time. And so in order to drag this over to the reference as a layer, you have to really specifically follow this. You have to go over to this bottom right over here. You have to click the icon of this layer, and then you have to drag it over here and let go. Oops. You have to drag the icon, bring it over here, and actually bring it down here and let go. And so that will bring it on as a second layer. And then over here, you have the opacity bar, just like we had in Photoshop. And so I can turn that down to see how my images are relating in scale, because we're going to do the same thing here, trying to line up the painting with the photo reference. And so as you can see, it's way bigger. So I'm going to throw out this layer because we need to resize it. So we got to shrink this. So we're going to go to Image, Scale Image, and then we can remember that it was actually, I think, 22 inches high. So let's change this to 22. You have to hit this to make sure that it applies the new scale to the whole proportion, and then you can click Scale. And so then now let's drag the layer over to the reference photo, drop, and you can turn down the opacity. You can actually type, I believe. So let's go to 50. And there we go. That's pretty much the exact same thing we were looking at in the Photoshop. And so then I can right click this and click duplicate layer and give myself 100% transparency and 50%. So why I have one at 100% and one at 50 is depending on your drawing or the reference photo, sometimes you won't be able to see very much at a 50% or just semi-transparent layer. And so sometimes the details are so fine that you have to just flip back and forth, zoomed in on one small spot. So this is a way to check your work and make sure that your subject is getting closer to a photo reference if you want to do that using GIMP. So now I'd like to show you how you can apply a grid digitally over a photograph using the free GIMP software. So here you can see I have, I'm just using my same cat reference. And what you're going to need to do is open up your photo that you're going to be applying the grid to. And to make things easy, what I've done is I've stuck 2 images of grids into the weeks folder that you can actually use in GIMP for this. One is 3x3 for square images. The other is 4x3 for rectangular images. And so the rectangular grid is closer to the dimensions of my cat image. So I'm going to use this one. So once you've opened up the grid, I need to rotate it. So I'm going to go to Image, Transform, Rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And then we need to make sure that the grid is the same size as the image. And anything you need to do in GIMP, you can usually just Google. It's how I taught myself how to use Photoshop and GIMP. So let's check on the height of this image, and it's 1080 pixels tall. And so let's make the grid 1080 pixels tall. So if you do that, then you have to hit this and it will scale the width to the same proportion and hit scale. So now they should be the same size. And so you can grab the icon of the grid from over here, the bottom right, bring it over to the cat icon, and drop it on the cat image. And that looks like it is lined up perfectly. So next you go over to opacity and reduce it. I put it at about 10 for GIMP. So that allows me to see the cat reference and the grid. The only limitation with this process over actually drawing on a printout is it's a lot easier, for me at least, to shrink these squares into smaller sections for the areas that I need more precise proportions for, such as the face. But it's possible to do in GIMP. Oh, and also, so you don't have to be looking at this on GIMP, you can export it. So if you go to File, Export As, you can download this as a JPEG. So now I should have this as a photograph to work from. Thanks.